Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast by AMPLOS. My name is Dr. Cory Shaffer, and a little bit of a different episode for you guys today that I'm excited about. So typically, if you're familiar with The Growth Project, what we tend to do in these episodes is frame them around, psychological concepts, things related to performance. For example, how to develop a growth mindset, resilience as adults, right? Or how to lead others within that. Today's going to be a little bit of a different approach, something we've never really spent much time on. But it's going to be more so, how do we instill these types of characteristics, maybe values and so on, in children? And so that's going to lead me to sort of the guest here today. Not really a guest at all to the Growth Project. He's been the man behind the magic now for years. Connor Huston, new dad.
That's right. Yeah,
so
3 weeks in.
3 weeks in. So welcome. Just give us your initial thoughts on parenthood. Before you kick it to me and put me on the spot, I want your thoughts on what's it like. What's dad like?
First of all, it is fun and also weird to be on this side of the camera.
I'm sure, yeah.
Normally on the other side. But I would say it is, how I would describe it in a nutshell is, first, amazing, but also like you're simultaneously the most filled up emotionally and happy you've ever been, and also the most physically drained because you're just so tired.
Right.
And everyone tells you this going in, but I think until you actually experience it, you don't realize how tired you are at that 3 o'clock feeding and stuff too. Yeah. But it's been amazing. I've always wanted to be a dad. So this is sort of life fulfilling for me.
Awesome. So this was really your brainchild, right? And something that I think that was just obviously on your mind, and something that you've certainly given some thought to. And I think you and I have talked plenty, like kind of went about it the same way that I did. You try to read as much as you can going in. Yeah. But until you really do it, until that baby comes, you're never really sure if you're prepared, if you're doing things right. Like it always feels like it's a little bit of a, you're building the plane as you fly it.
If that's definitely true. I would say my wife and I read a lot of books about the birthing process, and we're one of those people that we're going in with like a birth plan or birth preferences. And you could tell when we've talked to about that with people who had kids, they kind of were like having a smirk on their face, like, oh yeah, just wait, because nothing really ever goes according to plan. And that's exactly what happened with us. But I think that what's great about learning about all these things that are super important around becoming a parent is that there are ideas that really stick with you that are relevant regardless of however things kind of unfold. So that was sort of the idea behind this too, is the kind of legacy I care about in my life is what kind of parent I'm going to be and what I pass along to my kids. So that's why just being a new parent and you having 2 kids and having more years under your belt, and also with the lens of you being a performance coach, I thought it'd be a really great conversation to have, that not only I would find, some wisdom from, but also our listeners who are parents also could get some.
Well, and to be clear for our listeners, I'm certainly not claiming to be a parenting expert here. I do have 2 kids, and we're still in the early years of parenting, so I'm still learning. My son he'll be 4 in a couple of months. My daughter will be 15 months here in a few weeks, or in a few days, I should say. So we are still learning, but I do have, my master's degree is in developmental psychology. So once upon a time, I did, get some formal education around this type of a topic, oddly enough. So there is some awareness to it. And then more than that, it's just, the approach, I guess, and what we can talk about is how do we apply some of the things that we would normally talk about here? Mm-hmm. Like, what does it look like to apply that with this little person, right?
Yeah. And I also would add, too, that just seeing you and Kim as parents, you could tell you guys are like a true team. And you guys are great parents too. So I know what you're saying from the professional side, but I also think you're a great dad. So,
I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. All right, where are we starting?
The first question I have here is, you spend a lot of time coaching others on mindset, resilience, and performance. How have you applied those same principles to parenting, and what's changed in the way you think about these concepts since becoming a dad?
So I think the first thing that I would say just as like a starting point. And this has further, doing this as a parent has further reinforced how important it is. You know, when I'm talking to a college or professional athlete or people in the business world or whatever, but what you reinforce and praise is what they will ultimately end up learning, right? Like that's kind of how you shape what they end up valuing, right? The kind of mindset that they have, whether or not they develop resilience, like all that kind of stuff. A lot of it comes down to key figures in their life or in their lives, and in this case, of course, like as parents, you're the central figures. You know, our kids go to daycare 5 days a week, but we are still the central figures that they look to. So what you reinforce, what you praise, is ultimately going to be what they learn, what they come to understand, to value, and so on. And so, you know, one of the things that we mentioned here, we talk about like growth mindset so much, right? We really believe in that as a principle here at AMPLOS. And the research shows that how you develop, for example, a growth mindset in kids, starting with young kids, is you have to start reinforcing effort, right? More so than outcomes. The contrast, right? What happens and how a fixed mindset is developed is when all you ever do is praise and reinforce the result of something. So good grades. Or, you know, a young athlete plays a quote good game. You know, I always use the example of, especially when I'm talking to, adults, right? Parents who are sitting in front of me, you know, let's just say you couldn't attend your kid's game, okay, one night, like you had to work or whatever, right? You call them on the phone though, and you want to hear how the game went. The first question you're going to ask, I can guarantee, is, did you win? The second question you're going to ask is, how'd you do? And if we're honest, when you're asking how'd you do, what you're really asking, what were your stats? Right? Like, did you score a goal? How many points did you score in the basketball game? Did you get any hits, right? If you're a pitcher, how many strikeouts did you have? Like, that's what you're asking. But those are all outcomes and results. And when those are good, when they're favorable, right? When I get good grades, for example, and I hand that report card to mom and dad, and they say, wow, you're so smart. That label that they've placed on me now,
even a positive label.
That's a very positive label, right? You're smart, okay? But over time, if that continues to get reinforced, ultimately what you're developing within the kid is this belief that I have this special characteristic. Right? So me being smart, worse, is tied directly to these outcomes. Does that make sense? So the problem with that then is like, well, what happens if you don't get those outcomes? Right. And I just personal experience like that was my experience in school. I think I went to a pretty crappy public high school. School did come a little bit easier. It's not like I just slacked off. I got great grades and everything. I got straight A's and whatnot. I go on to college though. And now in my mind, I think I had developed this belief of like, I'm just smart. Like school comes natural for me, right? I don't really have to try hard at it. And I got punched in the face, with reality of like, wait, no, now you actually have to study. You really have to dedicate time to this. You have to work really hard to produce the same results that you once got. So for the very first time in my life, as a 19-year-old kid, I'm now not getting the results. And so I legitimately remember my first semester as a freshman at Cornell being like, am I smart? Like, am I supposed to be here? Right. Like, and so that foundation that I had built this entire identity on was so weak that the second I stopped getting those results, there was that immediate lack of confidence and questioning, like, I don't even know if I can do this.
So I guess then applying that as a parent, what would you do as the parent with your kid to kind of avoid maybe something like that kind of mindset?
So it's really hard, man. Again, my wife Kim also has a PhD in sports psychology, right? So we're both very well versed in performance and psychology and a lot of these things. And yet it's still so hard. A lot of this is just, number one, how we're all wired, but two, sort of our society, right? Western culture, what we value and so on. it's hard to not catch yourself. And
Oh yeah.
I've said the word to my 3.5-year-old, like I've referred to him as being smart, and I catch myself every time because I'm like, he does not need to hear that.
Yeah.
What he needs to hear, and what I typically, do a really good job of, and Kim does a really good job of, is sort of helping him to understand and almost connect the dots between, like, hey, the picture that you colored, you're so proud of it.
Yeah.
Because you worked really hard at it.
So talking about effort.
Correct. Right. So instead of praising like a label, that would be like the word smart or intelligent or, you're talented or something like that, right? Those are labels.
Yeah.
You want to find a verb, an action verb especially, that you can praise or reinforce. So effort, focus. I use the word focus a lot with him.
Yeah, that's great.
Just to try to direct his mind to like, hey, when I really like pay attention to what I'm doing, it produces a better result. And that's literally can be, I produce a better picture that I colored.
Sure. Yeah.
To, when he's like, now we're trying to get him used to like, hey, you're going to have to learn how to get yourself dressed. Right. And he's 3 and it's just funny to watch him try to do some of this on his own. But what I try to tell him is like, hey, when you really focus and you kind of slow down, do you see how much easier it is?
Yeah.
Right. Because there's that tendency to just kind of rush through it. But yeah, so it's really just trying to, it's do that. It's find the right things to reinforce. And so the dots now that he connects, hopefully in his head, are whatever the hopefully the positive results are that I get. The dots in my head are, I can trace it back to my effort, my focus, the time that I put in, that type of thing, not I'm smart, I'm talented, whatever.
Right. And this is how you're measuring success or teaching them how to think about success.
Correct. Yeah. So I think you boil it down to something as simple as that. So if you show them that there's value to, how hard they work, the time, the effort, and so on, and celebrate when like, hey, something is really hard and you were kind of frustrated, but you like worked through it. That's one of the things that I think we're really good at. Kim is great at.
Yeah.
Is when things are kind of frustrating, just helping him to understand like, hey, that's okay, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like keep at it,
Sure.
And then when he does successfully do whatever it was, sometimes it's just putting 2 Lego pieces together.
Yeah.
It's you celebrate it, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like that was really frustrating, but do you see how you just kept trying and you figured it out? So it's cool now. I was traveling for work recently. Kim actually sent me a video, and she just kind of set a phone up, and my son is like hitting off of a tee, right? Like hitting, like he's playing t-ball. And he swings and he hits one, and it's like, you can kind of tell it's not in the frame, but it's like, that wasn't a great one. And he immediately, like, it's interesting to hear his self-talk.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And he just says out loud, he's just like, that wasn't my best effort.
Oh, that's great. Because he's almost 4 and he's saying this
but my point, and that's what I texted back, and she was just like, oh, listen to this self-talk. And I just responded back like, that's a growth mindset.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. And so the next one you see him just like slow down a little bit. Right. You can almost see what would be a 3-year-old's version of like, he kind of dials in, his focus is a little bit better. And then again, like he hits the ball just like so solidly on his next swing.
Yeah.
And it was just cool to see, like, nobody had to say anything there.
Yeah.
He recognized it himself and was able to correct it. So that's what makes, I think, us feel like excited that like he's learning, he's on the right track, but we've got a long way to go.
It's also, I'm sure, cool to see too, like the things that you teach and believe in practice actually working.
Oh my gosh.
So little too.
Honestly, it's so fulfilling.
Yeah.
There's like such a celebration going on, in my head and Kim's head of just like, man, I think we're doing it right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that feels good.
I can imagine that would feel really good. And that's a great like reminder in terms of what to place an emphasis on in terms of what you're valuing and how you're measuring success. I want to jump to the next question here that I have is, how often, you often talk about journaling as a game-changing practice for personal growth. Is there a similar high-impact, low-effort tool that parents can use to help their kids build mental resilience and emotional strength? And this is something that has stuck with me in other conversations, just as like I've heard you say before, if there was one thing you could tell people who are trying to better themselves that they could do, that could have a huge impact that doesn't require a lot of energy, it's journaling.
Yeah.
So that's where I was just curious in terms of from the parenting side, is there something that's in that same kind of vein?
Yeah, I mean, teach him how to take a deep breath.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that's obviously such a simple thing, and that's, a really important skill in the performance, domain. When you're talking about athletes, especially, applies to you and I in the same way, right?
Yeah.
Just learning how to, when you do feel frustrated or you've lost focus or whatever it is, but just to kind of like take a breath to recenter and kind of reset yourself.
Yeah.
Tried to teach that to him at a pretty early age, and you see it sometimes show up unprompted, right? Kind of like I just described with him playing t-ball. Every once in a while you see him like take this conscious deep breath. Yeah. And it's like, again, this little reminder of like, oh man, nobody told him to do that. That was great. Yeah. But we try to communicate, especially because little kids, you can kind of see when they start to build up emotion, when they get frustrated, when they're upset about something. And just that simple cue and reminder to like, hey, take a deep breath, buddy.
Yeah. Is it sort of, I guess, like a reset? They can kind of just like take a step back from it.
Now, again, the challenge is they have such big feelings, but they don't know what to do. They don't know what they are, right? They don't know what to do with them. So sometimes the emotion just kind of takes over. Yeah. And that may result in, a tantrum or something. But even in that process, like to get him to kind of calm down, right? It's like, hey, take a breath, bud. Yeah. And when he does that, like it's amazing how much more quickly you can start to have like a rational conversation with him. Yeah. Right. But trying to catch that early has been pretty helpful at times, I think. And when you sort of see it building, just, hey, buddy. Yeah. Like take a deep breath, take a step back for a second from the Legos or whatever it is that is making you frustrated, getting you worked up. Take a deep breath. Yeah. And you can just kind of see that. And he, of course he like does it audibly and it's like this big, like, but it's great, because that's honestly, that's such a simple skill that I think will help him throughout his life now, but certainly, in the future. And I think that'll help him be resilient. Sure. Right. Because especially again, like we talked about earlier, if he believes that like, hey, it's okay to work hard at something and it's okay to be a little bit frustrated, but what I can do that might be helpful while I'm, struggling through this is just to like pause and take a breath. Yeah. Kind of collect myself and then come back to it. I think that's one simple thing that I come back to that I think has been really helpful, especially in that, like, everybody calls like the terrible twos. I think that was really helpful for us to come back to.
This is good to know for,
out. And like I said, we, admittedly, we probably haven't reinforced it as much because what I did, this was just another thing that we kind of would tack on to like our kind of bedtime routine. Was just like, hey, let's take a couple of deep breaths. What I would tell him is like, hey, buddy, we're going to meditate. And he could barely say the word meditate, but he would be like, okay, cool, Yeah. And I would just tell him to close his eyes and take a couple of deep breaths, and he would do it. So just understanding the language, understanding what it means. And I had to show him, like, how do you take a deep breath? And because I think he would just kind of look at me and he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be doing, but he's got it now, which is cool. And so now with my daughter, being about 15 months old, probably within these next few months, she'll start jabbering on and talking. And, we'll go through a similar process with her. So
that really resonates because I feel like it's something that, and I know you basically said this too, it's going to be helpful in adulthood. Yeah. And it's a good thing to practice now. And when you were saying that too, it made me think of even, it's like a recent example for me, when my wife was giving birth, they teach you how to breathe through that and how to take a deep breath, which is obviously a very different kind of thing what we're talking about here. But I feel like that is something that applies just like throughout your life. So that's such a great practice and good thing to keep in mind. So my next question I have here is, I'm only a few weeks into fatherhood, and I've already realized how much you have to tap into your own mental strength. So how has being a parent challenged your mindset? are there specific strategies you use in tough parenting moments, which I'm sure there are plenty of those?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and you mentioned this earlier, which was very cool to hear. I think the best strategy is being a team.
Yeah.
You know, there are just going to be times, I don't care how good at this thing you are, where it can be a lot,
Yeah.
you know, and it can be exhausting. It's taxing, like all the things that you're probably feeling right now. But I think what Kim and I have tried to rely on so much is, you know, the reminder that like we're in it together. I think we know each other well enough, of course, that we can kind of recognize that breaking point in each other.
Yeah. And I can already see how that would be so huge in terms of just like having each other's back.
So, and in those moments, I think we've tried to do a pretty good job of like, you know, if she sees that happening within me, where I'm just getting frustrated at whatever the situation is, you know, she'll just be like, hey, why don't you go handle Kennedy, our daughter, like I'll take Cam, you know, because she can see like, hey, your capacity to handle this right now is not great. It's probably going to result in you just getting frustrated, like it kind of boiling over,
which is very human too.
For sure. Yeah. And so let me step in because I've got greater bandwidth in this moment. Right. To just maybe come at this from a different angle. And try to settle him down or whatever it is. So she's essentially recognizing within me, I'm at a tough spot. And basically just like taps herself in and like gives me the break and the reset that I need.
That's great.
To kind of step away. To just get myself back to a nice neutral place.
Jumping into my next question here. You mentioned in a recent episode that you practice gratitude with your son, which I think is amazing, especially doing it so early. Can you share more about what that looks like in practice and why it was important for you to create that habit so early on?
So this actually came from one of my best friends of probably almost 30 years. I'll give him a shout out, Jake McBride, Nikki McBride, fantastic parents. And that's one of the things, honestly, that we've sort of done is, you know, like we talked about this from the start, I think we tried to come into it. We read some books. We tried to just build up our knowledge and awareness around what to expect and so on. But part of what we've also done is we've been very intentional about paying attention to other parents. And almost sort of like a la carte selecting what we like.
I totally can relate to this.
From like, oh man, we really love how, you know, these parents do this. Like we want to do that. And these other set of parents, like we really love how they do this. Let's take that. And that you end up sort of forming your own parenting style based off of all these things. And so this was one of the things we spent a weekend with my buddy Jake and his wife Nikki, and we just watched how they parented their daughter, who's a couple years older than Cam. So it was further along, you know, than he was at this time. And this is when we just had one. They might have just had one at the time too. They now have two as well. But anyways, this is something they did before bed every night. And I think immediately Kim and I had a conversation. We're just like, that's fantastic. We got to start doing that. Right. And like, I want to literally probably, you know, that Sunday night when we get back from this like long weekend, it was like, we did it for the first time. And I think you know, her and I are both very, very familiar with all the research and support of gratitude, how important it is, how helpful it is. I think gratitude is something that Kim, it comes very naturally for her. She feels it just very deeply. And I think it's really,
tell too.
No doubt. And I think it's just very important to her, almost like a value that she has that she wants to impart on her kids. It doesn't come natural for me. Like it's harder for me. So I have to be really intentional. And so for me, I need like a practice around it. I need a routine around it. And so this has been the perfect thing for me. Like where Kim's maybe naturally feeling
I didn't
it.
Consider that too.
Right. But for me, I have to like work at it. It's just not.
So it's been beneficial for you too.
Absolutely. I think it's been beneficial for both of us, but probably for me especially, because as a part of this, again, you know, just part of our kind of bedtime routine, you know, bath time's over, read a couple of books. The last thing we do before he gets into bed is we just say, hey buddy, what are you grateful for today? And early on, again, like literally when he's able to like communicate at all, we started this process.
Hey everyone, Connor here. Just a quick heads up. At this point in the episode, we had a glitch and our main recording cut out. Fortunately, we still captured everything on video, so while the audio quality might not be as crisp, the conversation is still top notch. Cory shares some really great insights. Thanks for sticking with us.
And the answers were sometimes just completely off the wall, or he would
Like,
say,
what would he say?
I remember when we started doing this, it was around the time when he first started doing swim lessons.
Okay. How old? So he's like 2?
He was probably about 2, yeah.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. But I remember for like a month straight, we'd be like, hey, buddy, what are you grateful for today? And he'd be like, going to the pool. We're like, buddy, you went to the pool on Sunday. It's Thursday. What are you grateful for today?
Yeah.
Right? Just today.
Yeah.
And so he kind of had a hard time grasping it early, but then it was really cool how you started to see his answers just over time.
Yeah.
Like evolve and get better. And now there are times where I'm almost floored at some of the answers he gives because you actually see that like he gets it.
Yeah.
And he's legitimately giving these like genuine answers.
That's so cool.
It is so cool.
Yeah.
Like it's very, very refreshing. But then as a part of it, like we don't just ask that of him.
Yeah.
Right? And so I would say like, okay, buddy, ask mom. So I would say, Mom, what are you grateful for? And I say, okay, Dad.
So it's kind of a dialogue too. Like
between all of us, yeah. And
that's cool.
It's cool then, especially when we sort of do fun things together, to be able to like kind of relive the day and he'll say, oh, I was grateful for, this thing that we did. And then we can say like, yeah, buddy, like we're grateful for that too. That was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But again, that's one of those things where I hope sort of down the line, that'll just continue to pay dividends and, ultimately just trying to prevent him from being, an entitled little shit to somebody who has a genuine level of appreciation.
Yeah.
And that's, beyond that comes with pleases and thank yous and that kind of stuff, which I feel like he's pretty good with. So yeah.
I love that. And I know just from working with y'all and just absorbing what you teach that one of the main things I've gotten is just how the importance of gratitude in general and how that you can't really be feeling stress and some of these like anxiety and some of these other emotions while you're feeling gratitude. So I think it's such a gift to give your kids. Absolutely.
And I think, there are those days that I think for Kim and I especially, when it's been a long day, it's been overwhelming, a lot on our plate, work, travel, whatever. For us to have to be forced to come up with an answer is important just for him to see that, sometimes it's like, man, the cup of coffee that I had.
Yeah, so it could be something small.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
I love this. I'm already like, there's so many things I'm already getting. I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely want to do this as a parent. My last question I have here is that kids are naturally curious, but as they grow, that curiosity can fade. How do you nurture a love for learning and self-improvement in your children?
Man, good question. I think this one, a couple of years from now, I'll probably have a better answer for you. I think right now, because of that curiosity, which is such a great thing, right, is really just creating a space for them where they can explore stuff and like really tap into that curiosity, which is sometimes hard, admittedly, because what I would love for my kid to do is, play sports. And how do you create a space to where you allow them to explore the curiosity and introducing him to stuff, right, I think has been good, right? So that's where we can introduce him to. And I will stand by, I think it will be really good for him to get involved in organized sports, right? Because of everything that you learn from sports. Yeah. Do I care necessarily what it is? Like, I mean, I have preferences, but again, it's like at some point I don't care. I just want him to be active. Yeah. I want him to learn how to work as a team. I want him to learn how to win and how to lose, like all of those things. But unless I introduce it to him, he might not know that exists. What's hard there is not trying to force things on him. Yeah. You can introduce him to stuff or, introduce kids to stuff, but you want their interest in it to be the driving force. So I think we'll always ask him like, hey buddy, do you want to go hit, we say like, you want to go hit some home runs?
Yeah.
And he really doesn't want to. Like, all right, I'm not going to force you to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do find something that they're interested in is, again, like let them do it, let them explore it, let them have fun with it.
Yeah.
Like that's the main thing though, is like, I don't ever want him to feel like
Pressure.
anything that he's doing, is like there's a pressure to do it or he's forced to do it.
Yeah.
I want him to have fun with it.
Yeah.
And I hope that's a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the more that he explores over time, I think that's how you really get exposed to a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You learn different things from sort of different domains. I think the skill set that you develop then is really vast, really broad, which is good.
I love that message is essentially exposing them to a lot of different things, but then also letting them choose and letting them be sort of the guide for what really interests them instead of sort of pushing something on.
Yeah.
This has all been really great. I honestly, genuinely, like just taking a lot of information and just, I want to be the best parent I can be. So I feel like everything y'all teach at AMPLOS is, I feel so good for anyone at any stage.
Yeah.
So this has been really helpful. And one last question just kind of occurred to me. When they are adults, say they're leaving the nest, they're going off to college or whatever, what do you hope what kind of adults do you hope that they will become in terms of not specific, like they're a baseball player or anything like that, but like in terms of their values and their character, and like, what does it look like to you that they end up having that kind of resiliency?
Yeah, I mean, I think that word is a really good word. I hope they're going to be resilient. I hope they'll have a level of like grit or toughness about them. I think Kim and I both have that. I don't want them, I mentioned this earlier and I'm serious, I don't want them to be entitled or feel entitled to anything. So I want them to have a level of humility and gratitude about them. I want them to, at the core, it's like, I just want them to be good people, you know, and understand. I want to expose them to and help them understand different perspectives, even if that's not going to be the world that they live in. I think it helps them. I think over the course of my life, all the different experiences I've had have contributed to hopefully just making me a better person. It gives me, I think if you experience a lot, and even just literally, like I've lived in 5 or 6 different states in different parts of the country and in cities and in rural areas and, went to school where diversity was, a real thing. And like all of those different things that I think just contribute to perspective.
I totally agree.
And I don't know how much of that I can fast track and develop in, an 18-year-old kid, right? But that's what I want. I want them to be somebody who recognizes that, hey, just because I grew up in, this part of the country and this was my experience, that's not the only experience. Yeah. And there's a lot of other experiences out there, and I just want there to be a level of appreciation for that. Yeah. I think that's really important.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I think ultimately kind of come back to, just the importance of family and close relationships and that kind of thing. I mean, even research supports that, like the more connected you are, especially across the lifespan, typically the longer you live.
Oh yeah.
So that's important, so I want them to stay connected to us, certainly, but really value that, and the kind of thing that we don't got to force them to want to come home or to take a family vacation, but that's something that, they look forward to, just like we do now with, our families. So,
my dad has said that he feels like one of the markers of like that you did a good job as a parent is that your adult children want to come hang out with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Out there just because they want to, because they enjoy the company. So,
yeah. So I mean, it's all those things. At the core of it, though, is just good human beings. Yeah. So hopefully we're on track for that. a long way to go.
I'm sure you are.
A long way to go.
Yeah. But thanks again. This was great to just hear your insights. And
again, I mean, these are obviously just our experiences, in some cases my opinion, but plenty of it also rooted in the science and the stuff that we do teach and preach regularly. A little bit of that background in formal education, and this helps some, but as you know, a lot of this is, you're drinking from a fire hose, man.
Yeah, definitely right now, yeah.
I think ultimately what it comes down to, if I were to put it simply, is like, you just, to a degree, there are sacrifices you need to make now and in the moment for the returns that'll come down the line.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes, in my opinion, in my observation, where I see parents struggle, is they do the thing that's easy today, but what they're sacrificing is developing the kind of characteristics you want in kids in the future.
That really hits home. Yeah.
You know, so that's what's so hard, in my opinion, about all of this, to just kind of simplify it down to one thing, is it's hard to feel like you're choosing suffering, right? For your kid. But again, in the moment, like, hey, them struggling is better for them down the line. As long as they know that you're there and you support them, you still love them and so on, right? But
it's a long game mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, man. So I guess that'll do it for us.
That'll do, yeah.
You know,
I felt weird like closing out.
No, that's okay. Hopefully there's some good stuff in there for our listeners. You know, if this doesn't apply to you, your kids are gone, they're out of the nest. Maybe somebody, forward along to somebody who you know is maybe in a different stage of life who would benefit from it. And if there's any dialogue that comes out of this, then great. Feel free to hit us up on socials or send us an email or something. But otherwise, thank you for tuning in. As always, like us, rate us, review us, and thanks for tuning in. We look forward to having you again on the Growth Project.